You know, it is one of the most popular Pokemon out there right now in the format, but there are so many different ways to run it. I mean, we saw a couple of Assault Vest Kyogre over in Europe at EUIC. You know, I've been seeing Life Orb a little bit this morning from Bilbao, which is kind of wild. You know, Mystic Water, I think, is the traditional item, but...
here we go.
Yeah, here we go. Plenty of information to be gleaned from this game one. John Hu versus Andrew Ding. Zacian Grimmsnarl out on the field against Grimmsnarl and the Lugia making an early appearance.
Oh, I am just so excited to see Lugia here. And so, you know, this is already what we were talking about. So the battle of the Grimmsnarls, right? Like, what Grimmsnarl sets are both players running? If you are John, for example, maybe you're a little bit concerned about Trick from the Grimmsnarl, Light Screen potential here as well. And Grimmsnarls can occasionally carry Fake Outs, so you could just go for something like a Fake Out Behemoth Blade onto Grimmsnarl if you have that, right? And so a big question is, what moves do these Grimmsnarls have? Because I think that will really dictate the pace of the set. And so it looks like John here wanting to conserve the Lugia. I think it's kind of a fantastic switch, right? This is the best way to cover for Lugia's, you know, taking damage from Behemoth Blade.
Exactly. Getting rid of that Intrepid Sword boost on that Zacian means it won't be able to do as much damage. Also, will be taking some great damage from that Incineroar later on. Light Screen first revealed from John's Incineroar, or excuse me, John's Grimmsnarl. Thunder Wave on the field as well. And Zacian fully paralyzed that turn one. What a tough matchup to start out with.
Yeah, the para definitely unfortunate here, as it'll enable John to, you know, get more moves off with the Grimmsnarl. If a Behemoth Blade went into that slot, maybe there's the potential for it to just pick up the knockout. Thunder Wave, really valuable speed control here, because now Lugia and Groudon from the opposing end can outspeed the Zacian as well. So, you know, a great switch in turn one, and it works out even better for John thanks to the full paralysis.
Some Intimidate coming out on the field from that Landorus on Andrew's side of the field. Zacian paralyzed again, not going to be able to attack, and will have its attack lowered even further. That Parting Shot, a classic Incineroar strategy. You send it out on the field, get that Intimidate. Parting Shot gets you another attack drop and gives you the opportunity to adjust. Probably not going to send that Lugia back out, but I stand mistaken. Lugia is here and ready with a Spirit Break from that Grimmsnarl, finishing up the turn, doing a little bit of damage to Landorus. That special attack drop, not as relevant here.
Yeah, I mean, the paralysis has got to be frustrating for Andrew here, right? But the thing is, like, you have to knock out Grimmsnarl to make sure it can't get T-Waves off. And so that's why, like, leading Fake Out plus Zacian is a pretty effective way to deal with Grimmsnarl. That's actually an adjustment Andrew can think about going into the subsequent game, maybe leading Instant Zacian, Rillaboom Zacian. But for now, I think John's actually positioned himself incredibly well, where the damage output from Zacian is non-existent. Landorus maybe can Dynamax here, but at this point, if this indeed is the weakness policy set, you're free to just go for a potential Sucker Punch into a weakness policy on Lugia. And then you can either Max Quake into the Grimmsnarl slot, or Airstream, or even Hailstorm if you have that onto the Landorus slot. So plenty of options here, but I think since Zacian is basically very weak at this point, it's better to target Landorus, since that's the clear Dynamax option right now.
Yeah, and Zacian even just getting out of the way. That Grimmsnarl coming back out on the field for Andrew, giving Zacian the opportunity to at least get that Intrepid Sword boost back up later on. Lugia, though, taking the Dynamax. There's the Sucker Punch from John's own Grimmsnarl to activate that weakness policy, going to boost Lugia's attack and special attack by 2 stages. Max Hailstorm will connect with the Landorus. Now, I'm pretty sure that's going to be a guaranteed knockout.
Wow. I mean, so there is the Sucker Punch. We do indeed confirm that it's the weakness policy set, and you have the Hailstorm as well. So a perfect turn for John there. And that's a really safe play to make, right? Because Zacian at this position just does no damage with the Intimidate and the Parting Shot. So you can Behemoth Blade Lugia, but it doesn't really do very much. You know, the only play Andrew maybe could have made there was either protecting Landorus if you have it, or switching out into Kyogre. But I think what's difficult right now for Andrew is, like, you know, what is your Dynamax option? It's going to be the Kyogre in the back, right? So what he has to do is stall out the Lugia's Dynamax, but that's actually really difficult to do right now because it already has the policy boost, right? So here, Grimmsnarl's back out. You already set up the Light Screen. You can maybe go for a Thunder Wave onto the Lugia, hope for some paras right now. And, you know, know, on John's end, you still have the Incinerate to switch in, so you just get another Intimidate onto Zacian and just reduce its damage output.
And also provide some fake out pressure possibly for the next turn, as that Intimidate will do what it does best and give Lugia the opportunity to go for another attack. This is going to be a Max Quake into that Zacian.
Wow.
Does not find the knockout thanks to the light screen still being active on the field, but that Zacian is just ready to be knocked out by whatever attack is thrown its way next.
Oh
and
my goodness.
Another full paralysis. Fortunately, Foul Play will do decent damage thanks to that weakness policy activation, but still, that Zacian, what a tough break for it this morning.
Yeah, Foul Play, a big reveal there actually, because it means you have reasonable damage output into Lugia. Otherwise, you know, Grimmsnarl's attacks that you normally run, such as Sucker Punch or Spirit Break, don't really do as much. But another unfortunate roll there. I mean, that's 3 full paras in a row, and so that's sometimes, you know, what you just have to accept when going up against Grimmsnarl. But like I mentioned, you could just try to, you know, not let Grimmsnarl get a single attack off, but that was definitely unfortunate. I was curious how much Behemoth Blade would do in that position. And Zacian bulky enough to actually survive the Quake, which is a big deal here.
Yeah, and finally gets to do something. Protect this turn. Fake out, though, targeting down the Grimmsnarl on Andrew's side of the field. Max Airstream will find its mark on that Grimmsnarl as well, bringing it down into the red and giving Lugia another speed boost.
I think it's really important to highlight the value of Light Screen in this game, because Lugia ideally wants to pick up like one-hit knockouts in each turn, just because it's so much stronger in the Dynamax form. And so the fact that the Zacian and the Grimmsnarl both can take a +2 max move under Light Screen is actually a really big deal, as Light Screen wears off on the opposing side. So that's actually also important information, as you now know that it's not Light Clay, which is, you know, a very common item. And so yeah, I'm curious on the other moves on the Grimmsnarl here for Andrew, right? Do you have a way to get speed control onto the Lugia? You know, the thing is that Lugia's airstreamed, so you have that speed boost as well. But, you know, the upside for Andrew is that he still has a Dynamax, but no speed control. It's actually just a Blizzard to potentially pick up a double knockout there.
And the Hail will make sure that Blizzard is accurate as well, finding the double knockout onto Andrew's 2 Pokemon, leaving him with just that Dynamax target left, as Incineroar tries to get a parting shot in. Maybe if Andrew went for a switch, that would have been a nice attack drop to get, but will not find it this turn.
Yeah, and so it's got to be Kyogre coming out. You would think, okay, now you can Dynamax it, but the thing is that John still has all 4 of his Pokemon. And right now, the Lugia also has that speed boost, and it's also faster already. That's actually one of the upsides of Lugia. It's actually got a pretty good base speed, and so now you can go for, you know, your flying type attack onto the Kyogre like an Aeroblast. Incineroar here is in an interesting position. Like, you could, oh, okay, we're actually just going to see the forfeit, which makes sense, right? I mean, it's so hard to come back down like 1v4 there, and like you might as well conserve your information on your Kyogre set. Don't want to reveal the item or any moves on it, and I think a comeback from that angle was nearly impossible anyway.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like the only piece of information you might try and fish for would be what was John's last Pokemon, but I would assume that it was the Groudon personally, maybe. So maybe you just make that assumption going into game 2. And again, rethink your Lugia strategy. You know, the Foul Play reveal on that Grimmsnarl seems like it has a lot of potential, you know, doing about 50% through Dynamax, which was incredible. But Lugia had already just had so much momentum at that point that wasn't enough to stop it.
Yeah, so I think a couple of questions here is the lead adjustment. I feel like John had a lead that was already threatening, but the Incineroar switch impossibility is just so strong to shut down Zacian. So from Andrew's end, it's like, first of all, like, he got no value out of Dynamax in that game, right? So you got to Dynamax a little bit earlier, but how do you actually effectively do that? I'm also still curious about his Grimmsnarl set, right? We've seen the Foul Play, we've seen the Light Screen, but he's not running Light Clay. So, you know, if you have Trick or speed control like Thunder Wave or Scary Face, that can be really valuable. And if you want to, you know, deny the Thunder Wave on Zacian turn 1, you can lead Fake Out here next to like Instant Zacian, Rillaboom Zacian, for example. But it's tough. I actually think Lugia has a fantastic matchup in this, just in this matchup. So the first question is, can you deny it the weakness policy boost? And if not, can you, like, the thing in that game was like Andrew, you know, was able to survive, but it doesn't matter if you survive if you can't get damage in return, right? And unfortunately, obviously, he got 3 full pairs in a row with Zacian, which did not make the game easy for him either.
Yeah, I'd be curious to see how much Behemoth Blade would have done to Lugia after that Intimidate and the parting shot. I mean, if that had done, you know, around 20% through Dynamax, that would have been enough, I feel like, to tip the scales in Andrew's favor. So the adjustment could really just be that simple. You know, maybe deny the Thunder Wave paralysis, or otherwise protect Zacian a bit more, or maybe just hope to be a little bit luckier.
I think what's tough here is that like Landorus T feels like a really weak Dynamax option because now you know the Lugia has Hailstorm, right? And so it's like maybe you just drop the Landorus. Yeah, it's like a little bit valuable for intimidating Groudon, but Lugia seems to be like the clear Dynamax option after that last game. So maybe you want to prioritize bringing out Kyogre a little bit earlier on, just Dynamaxing it immediately. +2 max Airstreams will hurt, but if you have Light Screen up, Kyogre can take it decently well, and so you kind of just trade like Kyogre's Dynamax for Lugia's Dynamax, install Lugia's Max, and then use like Zacian in the late game to maybe clean up. But I think the core of Grim, Lugia, Incin, and Zacian in general is just really powerful here, and it's tough to break through. So we'll have to see. I'm really curious about the adjustments here because I feel like the Lugia just has such a good offensive matchup here, and I'm also curious, like, do you actually have a way to deny the Sucker Punch into the policy activation? One way is, like, Fake Out plus Behemoth Blade, but then the thing is, John in that position could just pivot Lugia out into Incin exactly like he did. So then it's like, okay, but if you knock out Grimmsnarl on turn 1 and it can't Sucker Punch, then if Lugia doesn't get his weakness policy off, it's so much weaker, right? Like, in that previous game, Andrew's Pokemon were already surviving even at +2. Lugia at no special attack boosts, it feels so weak, honestly.
Yeah, and that's why I think a lot of people do run Lugia in this way. You know, you want that weakness policy, you want multi-scale, and you want that Dynamax. And I feel like the only way to really adjust if you were to try and change your approach with Lugia would be you leave Lugia behind. But given that game 1, I think Lugia will be making a prompt appearance here on the field right off the bat for John against the Zacian and the Grimmsnarl, again for Andrew.
Okay, so a repeat here. Andrew not going for Fake Out user potentially to just KO the Grimmsnarl immediately. So yeah, I'm wondering if Grimmsnarl has some other, you know, moves that weren't used in that previous game that could help out against Lugia. Like I'm thinking about Trick, right? Just because that is one of the other variants, especially with Iron Ball, and that can at least prevent Lugia from attacking first. The other question is, do you just let your Zacian get hit by Thunder Wave again, right? For John's end, it's pretty safe to just switch Lugia out into Incin and make the same play. But, ooh, we're going to see a Dynamax instead.
All right, well, I would assume, given that's on John's side of the field, it's going to be that Lugia making another Dynamax appearance, growing in size, doubling its HP, and possibly setting itself up for a nice weakness policy activation to get that damage down as we get off to a really aggressive start to this game, too. But Grimmsnarl tricking a Iron Ball over to Lugia, going to have its speed and also remove the weakness policy. Grimmsnarl on John's side of the field going for that Thunder Wave once again, so a lot of speed control here. But fortunately for Zacian, will still be faster than Lugia since it does not have any Airstream boosts up quite yet. Behemoth Blade into the Grimmsnarl will find a knockout, and that Lugia is left on the field currently undamaged, but also does not have weakness policy, will not be throwing out those powerful attacks like we saw in game 1. Airstream will do some nice speed control, getting a +1 speed boost, but Grimmsnarl just has so much more health left to work with this game.
One thing to call out there as well, Gabby, is that the Grimmsnarl went for Trick with Iron Ball before Thunder Wave came out. So then that implies that John is also probably running an Iron Ball, or could be like a lagging tail as well. And so Trick is the exact adjustment that you need to make here, but it's also a really big deal that Grimmsnarl moved before the opposing Grimmsnarl, right? Because it means that you can't just go for the Sucker Punch very easily. You have to worry about the Trick immediately to start the game. And so that's exactly the adjustment Andrew needed to make, which is knock out Grimmsnarl and don't let the weakness policy get activated. He's somehow managed to get, you know, do both in the very first turn of the game. So yes, Zacian is paralyzed, but now you're in a much better position. It's still scary, right? Because now Zacian's like still going to be slower, but this time around you can Dynamax Kyogre with a lot more confidence. And so then a big question is, did John bring Venusaur or Alecki this time rather than Incineroar?
Well, no switching yet. Instead, Zacian going for a Protect, not wanting to take any damage from that Groudon this turn. Grimmsnarl going for Reflect, will be having the physical damage on the field, recognizing that Groudon is the bigger threat on John's side of the field right now. Airstream will connect with that Grimmsnarl, but will fail to find the knockout, giving that Grimmsnarl one more opportunity to set up maybe another screen or possibly go for a foul play for some nice damage. And Groudon also taking some time to set up with a nice bulk up to boost its attack and defense by 1 stage each.
Bulk up, not a move that you see that frequently. Swords Dance is often a move that's used a little bit more, but bulk up is actually really cool, right? Because it means you get that defense boost, so you take less damage from Behemoth Blades from Zacian or potential max moves from Landers or even Rillaboom. And so it's a nice turn for John to, you know, get some good speed control as well as some good stat boosts. I think right now Andrew is basically, like you mentioned, maybe angling to set up another screens. It's going to kind of be difficult to get a foul play off given the speed boost at this side. So yeah, just go for another screens, get a Behemoth Blade off, and then play towards your end game with Dynamax Kyogre ideally.
Yeah, that light screen will also give this Zacian hopefully a couple more opportunities to get attacks in. But first, another bulk up from that Groudon at +2 attack at this point. Those Precipice Blades are going to hurt whenever they start happening. Another Airstream will finally find the KO onto the Grimmsnarl on Andrew's side of the field, meaning this Lugia at +3 speed, Groudon at +2 speed. These are two Pokemon that Andrew has to be very afraid of as he goes into the latter turns of this match. Zacian, though, will find an attack, will connect that Behemoth Blade with one of these two Pokemon, going to be that Lugia, for a decent amount of damage.
Yeah, that's actually a good damage calc to know. Like, yeah. I feel like, you know, normally with Zacian onto a Dynamax Pokemon, I'm like, oh, it's just going to faint. But Lugia obviously very bulky, so actually takes that pretty well. You know, the bulk up here is really interesting, but the defense boosts don't really help you against Kyogre. And so you can get a +2, you know, Precipice Blades off right now. But from Andrew's side, you can either just protect the Zacian, Dynamax the Kyogre. I'm also curious what Andrew's fourth is here because Landers felt really weak in the previous game, so maybe he dropped it for one of Incineroar Rillaboom. Either way, though, like Kyogre right now, free to Dynamax, free to just go for like a Geyser onto the Groudon slot. Lugia's damage output, not really that good right now, especially with the screens and the lack of weakness policy.
Yeah, Zacian going to switch out, and Andrew revealing his final Pokemon. It's going to be Incineroar, so that Intimidate taking away one of Groudon's attack boosts and making things a little bit more comfortable for this Kyogre, especially if it is going to go for that Dynamax. And it will indeed go for that Dynamax.
I think in this position just makes sense to Max, right? You don't want to risk getting crit by an Aeroblast or a Precipice Blades. And at this point, even though John has Venusaur and Regieleki in the back, you know, those Pokemon are, first of all, he might not have even brought it, right? If it's Incineroar, then Kyogre just really feels like it can sweep very easily now. But even if it's Venusaur or Lecky, like, especially, ooh, Precipice Blades? Okay. I thought I might have missed there, but it's actually the Shuka-Berry reveal on Incineroar.
Yeah, I was going to say it might still miss, but indeed it is able to connect with both Pokemon on Andrew's side of the field. A Blizzard following up with a connection as well. Not going to do any damage. Kyogre following that up with a Max Geyser to target down this Groudon, and it's knocked out. The rain, the fact that that's probably off of an Origin Pulse or a Water Spout for base damage makes that one of the most powerful attacks in the game, revealing Life Orb as well on that Kyogre.
And there's the Incineroar in the back, and so, right, late game Kyogre's amazing here, right? So the game's not over yet, but I think it is so much in Andrew's favor right now. The Blizzard from John, by the way, is to fish for a freeze on the Kyogre. If you actually get the freeze there, and then, you know, Kyogre just doesn't get any attacks off, you just win with Lugia Groudon. So even though it's a slight win condition and very narrow, is certainly still a way to keep John in the game, so definitely can respect that. At this point, though, I think it's so difficult to knock out Kyogre in Sin and with the Zacian in the back, and so you can't even click Fake on it to Kyogre, so maybe you just keep fishing for freezes. You don't get the freeze, Kyogre could just one-shot the Incineroar, suddenly it's a 3v1. The Incin can parting shot from Andrew's end as well, so...
Yeah, that fake out on John's side of the field will connect with Andrew's Incineroar and allow it to not go for the fake out. Aeroblast, though, the move of choice into Kyogre, no critical hit, just a nice amount of damage. Max Geyser will target the Lugia and find the knockout there. So you don't even have to worry about the Incineroar. You just knock out the Lugia, and then this Incineroar on John's side of the field, you know, did its best, but probably not going to be able to take the 3v1 at this point.
Yeah, that play makes sense. I think, you know, John's only counter to that is maybe protect Lugia and like parting shot into Kyogre. And so Andrew going for the target onto Lugia instead of Vincent makes sense. Like the reason you target Vincent there is just to guarantee a knockout.
Exactly.
But at this point, you know, he has such a big lead anyway. So I'm curious, like John's adjustment going into game 3, do you drop Incineroar because it was absolutely useless in this game? You could go to Venusaur or Regieleki. And I think like John has to, now he knows about the trick, right? Like, so that drastically changes how you play and lead in the game specifically. And it feels like both of these games have been determined pretty early on. In this game, it actually felt really difficult for John to do anything past turn 1. And that's the reality of using Lugia when you don't get the policy off.
Exactly. Exactly, and I feel like you have to wonder, you know, going into game 3, will my opponent even give me that option? Do I bring Lugia? Like, I almost want John's adjustment to be maybe leave Lugia behind, rely more on the classic, you know, Sun versus Rain matchup. You know, he certainly has the tools with the Venusaur and the Regieleki, like you're saying. You know, you don't have to bring Lugia. Yes, it's a very cool tech. Yes, if you do get that weakness policy off, you basically win the game. But knowing that your opponent has Trick anything, it's almost like the item doesn't matter. It's just the fact that you can remove the weakness policy is really the key point to take away.
Yeah, absolutely. So the fact that Andrew has that and the fact that his Grimmsnarl will move first is like a really scary combination to deal with here. And so, you know, if you're John, you know how much speed investment you're running, but you don't know how much Andrew's running. But since the opposing Grimmsnarl did move first, you have to assume that, you know, it will move first again. And so there are a lot of interesting adjustments. I agree with you. Like you can bring Lugia if you're confident in getting the policy activation off, right? But the tricky thing is like the only way you get it off is Sucker Punch via the Grimmsnarl. So that means you actually need Grimm and Lugia out on the field simultaneously. You can't just like say switch in Lugia and then activate its policy because Sucker Punch will fail, right? Yeah. And so that's the tough thing, right? Like, do you feel confident leading Grimm Lugia? Because I wouldn't going into Grimm Zacian.
I certainly wouldn't either. I mean, it just seems like such a risk, you know? And while it's really a cool strategy, I don't know. I'm a very consistent type player. You know, I don't like to take those big risks. But if John has a good read on Andrew and a good read on this team and knows his matchup, then I think that's the call you make. Because if you are able to catch your opponent by surprise, especially in game 3, I mean, that is such a valuable position to be in.
Yeah, I think an Incineroar Grimmsnarl lead would be interesting on John's end if you expect Zacian and Grimm again. Venusaur can also pull off some stuff, but it's really scary, I think, leading it because you can just get tricked away. Venusaur is interesting, though, because you haven't revealed it all, right? So you have a lot of value in like the lack of information. And we're actually going to see Incin and Regieleki.
A bit of a classic lead, if you will.
Yeah.
I feel like these two love to be on the field together against the Zacian and the Grimmsnarl once again on Andrew's side.
So Aleki is really interesting here, right? It's not come out in the battle, so it's like we were talking about Venusaur, you also have the element of surprise here. We don't know what kind of set it's running. You know, some players like to run Life Orb Modest Aleki, which can just absolutely crush either Pokemon. I like the Incineroar adjustment here. That's kind of what I was alluding to with Incin Grimm, where now you can at least fake out. And Aleki, I think, even a better partner because you can just fake out and go for, you know, an electric type attack onto that slot. But Landorus comes back, so Andrew makes the adjustment again, and this could be very, very bad for John, especially if Aleki Dynamax is here.
Oh, definitely. Landorus, a ground-type Pokemon, will not be taking any damage from Aleki's electric attacks, but no Dynamax this turn. Instead, that Zacian protecting itself from a possible fake-out, Volt Switch into that Protect, and Incineroar finishing up with a parting shot. So will give John the opportunity to pivot here into something that can maybe handle this Landorus a little bit better, but that Aleki is in such a tough spot.
Yeah, that's a great parting shot, though, right? I think a lot of players in that position might be tempted to just fake out the Grimmsnarl and then go for even maybe a Dynamax on Aleki. But this is actually one other way now to activate your weakness policy, self-Volt Switch into Lugia, Dynamax, and just max Hailstorm into Landorus. And so I love this adjustment by John. He dropped the Grimmsnarl. He found another way to self-activate the weakness policy. And now that we've seen the Volt Switch, right, not every Regieleki runs it, but here, very valuable into activating the weakness policy. So that was a fantastic turn one by John. Andrew made the nice adjustment by bringing Landorus as well. And so recognizing, hey, Hailstorm might come out, going to switch back out into the Grimmsnarl now.
Yeah, and Grimmsnarl will at least have one opportunity to attack thanks to that Prankster ability next turn, assuming we don't see that Volt Switch play, but it's looking more and more likely as this Lugia once again will Dynamax. My big question is, you know, with the multi-scale ability, how much damage is this Aleki going to do to the Lugia? Because I feel like this is going to hurt a lot.
Yeah, my question also is, did you Airstream the Grimmsnarl? If you one-shot Grimmsnarl right now, you're in an amazing position. So there is going to be the Volt Switch, but it's actually not going to go into the policy, just going into Zacian instead, maybe not wanting to deal very much damage to itself, like you mentioned, Gabby. And so I think this turn could have been really scary for Andrew if you went self-Volt Switch, activate policy, and knock out Grimmsnarl. Incin is a nice pivot here, and, you know, Lugia can maybe still knock out the Zacian with the Max Quake, so it doesn't necessarily need the weakness policy this turn.
Yeah, but for now, the Lugia will be taking a little bit of damage from this Behemoth Blade off the Zacian. Another thing to keep an eye out for this next turn is, you know, possibly fake out plus an attack.
I'm just laughing because have you ever seen a Dynamax mon take that little damage like from a Behemoth Blade? I mean, it's a testament to Lugia's bulk, but as you can see, Lugia's offense is also very subpar here, right? And so John going for the Hailstorm onto Grimmsnarl. Andrew makes that great switch. I like to switch into Grim here rather than Kyogre as well. It's a little bit scary to switch in Kyogre because it's, you know, your main max option, and if the Volt Switch play does happen, you get airstreamed. It's like an absolute disaster. Now this actually works out pretty well for Andrew, as in, like, you know, you can at least maybe angle for another screens. Now from John's end, you can just fake out the Grimmsnarl and go for a max airstream onto that slot. I'm honestly curious if that guarantees the knockout. I don't know.
think so. Like, I was just trying to do that math in my head. I mean, there is the hail up on the field, which means Grimmsnarl will be taking, you know, a little bit of damage in between turns. But I think Lugia is going to fall short of this knockout, which means Grimmsnarl should be able to get a screen up on the field at some point. First, though, Andrew going to switch out that Zacian. That Landorus coming into play, going to intimidate the opposing Incineroar. And Grimmsnarl going to be flinched by this fake out. So
let's see. If you get the KO here, it's a really big deal because it denies a light screen. But if you don't get the knockout and a light screen goes up, that's really bad. And Grimmsnarl does hang on. It's going to hang on after the hail as well. And this is where the lack of weakness policy on Lugia early on really puts it in a hole, right? And so this set has highlighted all the ups and downs of Lugia, right? It's like with the policy boost, you can just knock out so many things, but without policy, it's really struggling here. And so Andrew's doing a great job of stalling out the Dynamax, and once Dynamax is over, Lugia is just so much more underwhelming, especially because, like, Blizzard is one of your attacks, right? And, like, that's just relatively low accuracy, and Andrew can change the weather with Kyogre switching in as well. So now Grimmsnarl can angle for setting up a light screen. You can even think about Reflect if you're worried about, like, the late game Groudon, because it's already the last turn of Dynamax from Lugia. And then Landorus here still doesn't really want to take a Hailstorm. You could Dynamax it, or you could just switch out into Kyogre or the Zacian. So that from John's end, do you Hailstorm Landorus, or do you go for an Airstream instead?
Yeah, it's a tough call to make. I also have to wonder, do you consider Max Guard as well, knowing that Grimmsnarl could go for a trick, and then you're just in a situation where you don't even have that weakness policy to fall back on. I think if I were in John's shoes, my biggest concern would be, can I hold on to this weakness policy so maybe I can just make use of it later? And
there's
that's indeed what he's going to go for. That Max Guard will protect Lugia, but Andrew not falling for it. That light screen will be set up, so even with the weakness policy, possibly eventually his Pokemon won't be taking as much damage. A parting shot from that Incineroar will lower the Landorus's attack, and I think we all know how this works. The biggest question, though, is what Pokemon does John send in? I don't think you send in a Lecky staring down a Landorus like this.
It's so stressful because, yeah, like you mentioned, you don't want to bring it out, but then now you bring out Groudon, which means Andrew can have weather control.
Yeah.
And you also get rid of the hail, and so Grimmsnarl hangs around for another turn, meaning that it can still angle for a trick as well. It's also funny to see the Incineroar outspeed the Landorus in that position. You know, had speed boost, but yeah, that's always amusing. And so Groudon is able to come in for free. The downside with this Groudon, though, is that, you know, it still just gets wrecked by Kyogre. So the upside for John this game is that you at least have Regieleki, but Regieleki, you know, against the Dynamax Kyogre with light screen up doesn't really do that much damage. So this is why I was, like, so heavily emphasizing, if you knock out Grimmsnarl earlier, that's such a big deal. Grim has gotten so much value now, right? You're getting screens up. You can even pressure with Trick. And because Lugia chose to go for the Max Guard, yeah, you, like, deny the Iron Ball trick potential play, didn't even happen. Now you're in such a, you know, weird position, right? And, like, Landorus and Kyogre are both really solid Dynamax options, that at this point, Lugia, if it wants to KO the Landorus, has to click Blizzard as well, and the accuracy of that in itself is just so poor.
Yeah, and some interesting information revealed from that. Landorus went for Rock Tomb against the Groudon, and we saw a speed drop there. So really good information, something for John to keep an eye out for. But there's the trick, going to be taking that weakness policy away from the Lugia, giving it back that Iron Ball that I'm sure it loves. Blizzard not connecting with the Landorus after all of that will secure the knockout on that Grimmsnarl, but a tough miss. Would have not knocked it out, but at least gotten some damage down. Earthquake now going to hit both targets, as Iron Ball will force Lugia to make contact with the ground.
I'm honestly curious if Blizzard would have KO'd the Landorus there, especially if it's like an Assault Vest, because he has Light Screen and Assault Vest, and Lugia's damage output's actually pretty underwhelming. But that's the downside of using Blizzard, right? Like, it makes you have a really powerful max movement, and it's so much more inconsistent outside of Dynamax. And so now Andrew's positioned himself fantastically, where you've gotten Kyogre out into a really safe spot, and it can, you know, just Dynamax as it did in the previous game. So, you know, John does have all of his Pokemon, but it is a really tough position right now. As you called out as well, the other cool thing about about the Iron Balls grounding the flying type Pokemon, so you get some nice damage onto Lugia. And so in this position, it's interesting. You actually could consider like not Dynamaxing Kyogre and just going for your spread water type attack. Of course, then you risk the Groudon outpacing you and maybe getting like a critical hit Precipice Blade, so that's one thing to watch out for. Although we actually saw the Rock Tomb, so actually because of the Rock Tomb, Kyogre should just be faster here. And it's going to switch, yeah. Yeah,
I think you have to switch that Groudon to keep it safe, but that Incineroar is not going to enjoy taking this attack and its Steed. Will at least get another Intimidate down on this Landorus, so Lugia isn't as afraid of those Earthquakes, but still a very tough position for John, and Andrew, recognizing the opportunity, will go for that Dynamax on Kyogre.
Yeah, you know, interestingly enough, I think there's the possibility of Dynamaxing Landorus in this game as well, because then you can Airstream your Kyogre, then protect the Kyogre, get another Airstream onto it. But I think Kyogre also just, you know, a very effective Dynamax, and you know with Landorus your damage output isn't as good, so you can make a good argument for both here. But we are going to see the Protect from Lugia, so, you know, John's goal now is to stall out the Kyogre's Dynamax essentially, and then use Alecki in the late game to beat it.
Yeah, U-turn though, going into the Protect on Lugia, Landorus stuck on the field, but Max Geyser from that Kyogre will connect with the Incineroar and will knock it out, forcing John to, I think, send out the Groudon once again, try and get that weather control back, if only for a turn, and like you said, give Alecki the space so it can come back on the field once Kyogre's Dynamax has ended.
Yeah. Alecki is actually going to switch in, so I think now what you can angle for from John's end is like switching Lugia out into Groudon, protecting the Alecki maybe. I think one play, especially because Andrew did have the U-turn there, was actually just U-turn and Water Spout there. There was actually very little to cover for that. And Alecki actually, no switch into Groudon, is just going to get the Volt Switch off, so you're going to be able to change the weather here and also conserve the Regieleki. So you're actually, you know, slowly whittling away at the Kyogre, which is pretty crucial here.
Yeah, you know, that little bit of damage now could mean that Alecki will be able to one-shot that Kyogre once the Dynamax has ended. I think the biggest question for me is, will we see another U-turn? Maybe that Zacian making an appearance, but Blizzard able to find its mark, not going to do any damage to the Kyogre. Barely brings that Landorus down to half its health, and U-turn will finally allow that Landorus to switch out and that Zacian to come back on the field.
Landorus is so important to conserve right now, and you can see, yeah, Landorus takes so little damage from the Blizzard with Light Screen and presumably the Assault Vest as well. And so from Andrew's end, it makes sense to conserve the Landorus because it just beats the Regieleki in the late game, right? And so Geyser is going to come out here. I am curious to see whether or not it gets the one-hit KO onto whatever its target is. I would think so, just because it's such a powerful attack, and it is, yeah. And so that changes the weather. Now Alecki comes back out. You know, the interesting thing with Lugia is that it does have the Iron Ball, but because of those speed boosts that it got, it's actually still relatively speedy. But the thing is that there's still another turn of Dynamax here.
There is, and presumably Kyogre has access to maybe a Max Lightning or something if Andrew wanted to go for that super effective damage here. I don't think you do. I feel like you worry about setting up the terrain for the Regieleki in this position, but still, you know, you have your two most powerful attackers out on the field side by side. Zacian more than capable of picking up a knockout on Regieleki, barring a Focus Sash or something. I feel like Andrew just has to, you know, keep that win condition in mind and just make sure that the Landorus, if it is forced back out onto the field, will be able to find an easy knockout on either of these targets.
Yeah, what's interesting is, like, John can definitely win this game. This turn is a big one. Like, you would think you'd want to double protect because you don't, like, Lugia will just fame from a Max Geyser. But it's actually just going to be offense coming out immediately. It might be a Thunderbolt Earth Power double up into Zacian. And the Paralysis comes out!
I was going to say that Zacian dodged it, but not for long. That Earth Power now will be able to pick up the knockout on that Zacian. I think that Paralysis crucial, allowing that Lugia to outspeed and get that attack in. Max Geyser will connect with the Regieleki, bringing it down to the Focus Sash. So John finding an out, a little bit of luck, but this is that opening that you were hoping for, I think.
Yeah, that's actually huge. Like, you know, I was thinking about double protecting there, but going for the para play, right? If you don't get the para there, you likely just lose. I guess you could crit into Zacian as well. Light Screen also just ended, right? So, like, now Lugia has the ability to just go for Blizzard onto Landorus. Regieleki can just Thunderbolt into into Kyogre. So getting the paralysis to drop the speed there, a very, very narrow win con. So now the question is, you know, do you just go for Thunderbolt into Kyogre and then a Blizzard onto Landorus? And if you go for the Blizzard, does it connect and does it KO?
I know, it's a win con, and you have to keep it in mind, but still, what a tough call for John to make here. I feel like you just roll the dice. I mean, it already worked out once, you know, why not just go again?
I think Thunderbolt Blizzard is a play I would make in this position, unless you think Aeroblast is going to KO, but I really wouldn't expect it to. So then, from Andrew's end, you know, do you think Kyogre can actually potentially survive? Because if so, then, you know what's tricky here is if Kyogre doesn't have Origin Pulse, then you can't actually knock out both Pokemon. And so, okay, Aleki's actually not for the Protect here. And I think that makes sense, right? You just go for the Blizzard, and maybe Kyogre doesn't even get the KO. And so baits out the Protect from Kyogre's end, which I think is really smart here.
Yeah, so Aleki setting itself up for success next turn. Here's the Blizzard from Lugia, and it does not connect. Earthquake from that Landorus will be connecting with that Lugia, though, and will be putting it with this, right?
Okay, yeah, it is a KO.
Knockout.
Oh my goodness.
What a turn there. Just so much going on, that Blizzard not finding its mark. It does have the opportunity, I guess, to try one more time?
You do, yeah. And so, I mean, here, one of the questions is, like he just protected, right? So I think Thunderbolt into Kyogre is the obvious play.
Yeah.
Landorus here, you know, wants to click Rock Slide or Earthquake. If the question is, do you have Rock Slide actually, right? Because we already saw Rock Tomb and U-Turn, and so if you don't have Rock Slide, like Earthquake is your best bet. So you can just go for Earthquake and try to pick up a double knockout. John, on the other hand, can like protect the Lugia, Thunderbolt into the Kyogre, but it doesn't actually really matter. I think what this boils down to is, can Lugia knock out the Landorus, and you do that through a Blizzard essentially.
Kyogre going for the double protect. It fails. Thunderbolt will find its target this turn and pick up the knockout on the Kyogre.
It all comes down to this. Does Blizzard connect?
Here we go.
Oh,
There's the Blizzard. It connects and it finds the knockout.
Wow.
John winning 2-1 against Andrew Ding, moving on in this tournament, still undefeated after what was quite honestly a nail biter of a match.
Yeah, I mean, props to him for finding